In the deserts outside Rome, soldiers were trained with a single rule that decided whether a man became a legend or a coward. It had nothing to do with winning. It had nothing to do with the outcome of the battle at all. It was about one single moment. The moment right before the arrow left the bow. You felt this before? The moment before you send the message, before you take the job or turn it down, before you say the hard thing to someone you love or stay silent instead. That moment is where regret is actually born. Not in the outcome afterward, but in something you already knew, deep down, right before you acted. And here's what almost nobody tells you. The Romans had a rule for that exact moment. One so simple, it sounds almost too obvious to work. And yet, it is the single most effective tool ever developed for making a decision you will never regret, no matter what happens next. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that rule is and exactly how to use it the very next time you're standing at a decision that scares you. Let's start with why regret actually happens. Because most people misunderstand it completely. You think you regret decisions because they turned out badly. You didn't get the job, the relationship ended, the risk didn't pay off. But watch closely and you'll notice something strange. Some people make a decision, it goes badly, and they feel no regret at all. Other people make a decision, it goes perfectly, and they're still haunted by it years later. The outcome was never the real cause. Regret comes from somewhere else entirely, from the gap between what you did and what you knew, in that quiet moment beforehand, you should have done. This is where the Roman soldiers come in, and specifically the archers, because their training gave us the exact framework the Stoics would later build their entire philosophy of decision making around. An archer does not control where the arrow lands. Wind shifts, distance deceives the eye. The target itself might move. A soldier who judged himself only by whether the arrow struck true would go mad, because half of that outcome was never his to control in the first place. So the Romans trained their archers on a different standard entirely. Judge yourself only on the draw. The stance, the aim, the breath, the release, every part of the process that was actually within your control. Do that with full skill and full honesty. And once the arrow leaves your hand, its landing is no longer your responsibility. You already did the only thing that was ever yours to do. This became a core teaching of the Stoics, and Marcus Aurelius wrote about it constantly in his own private journal, that you should act with full seriousness and full virtue in every choice, and then release your grip on the result completely, because the result was never within your power to begin with. Read that again, because this is the entire rule, hiding in plain sight. Regret is not a punishment for a bad outcome. Regret is what happens when you know, somewhere inside you, that you didn't actually draw the bow properly. You said yes because you were afraid to disappoint someone, not because it was right. You stayed silent because it was easier, not because you didn't have something to say. You took the safe path, not because it was wise, but because the arrow of courage felt too heavy to lift that day. That is where regret lives, not in the landing, in the draw. So here is the rule, stripped down to its simplest form, the exact one Roman soldiers carried with them before every difficult decision of their lives. Before you act, ask yourself only one question. Am I doing this with full honesty, full effort, and full alignment with who I actually want to be, regardless of how it turns out? Not, will this work? Not, will people approve? Not, will I get the outcome I want? Only this, is this action itself something I can stand behind, completely, before I even know how it ends? If the answer is yes, release the arrow. Whatever happens next is no longer a referendum on your character. It's simply what happens next. This is harder than it sounds because our minds are wired backward. We obsess over outcomes because outcomes feel measurable, controllable, almost predictable if we just think about them long enough. But that's an illusion, and it's an exhausting one. You can spend hours imagining every possible outcome of a decision, and you will still never control which one actually happens. What you can control, completely and totally, in every single decision you will ever make, is whether you drew the bow with integrity. That's it. That's the whole rule. And once you actually live by it, something strange happens. Decisions stop feeling so heavy. Not because the stakes get smaller, but because you stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry. Marcus Aurelius stood at the edge of wars he didn't choose, diseases he couldn't cure, and betrayals he never saw coming. And he wrote, again and again, that a man's job is simply to act well in the moment given to him, and let the rest belong to fate. Not because he didn't care what happened, but because he understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding, that the only decision you will never regret is the one you made with your whole character standing behind it. Everything else, the landing, the outcome, the way it's judged by others, that was never the archer's to control in the first place. So, the next time you're standing at a decision that scares you, don't ask what will happen if you do this. Ask only one thing: am I drawing this bow with everything I actually believe in? If the answer is yes, release it fully and let the outcome be what it will be. That is the entire Roman rule for a life with zero regret. Not because nothing ever goes wrong, but because you already did the only part that was ever yours to do. Rise like Rome. Because the archer who draws with honesty never has to fear where the arrow lands.